Right, so ready for a deep dive. Today we're tackling a historical puzzle, the fall of Jerusalem to Babylon. We're talking like 6th century BCE, right? A time of massive empires, crumbling kingdoms, the whole shebang. And smack dab in the middle of it all is this book of Jeremiah. And one scholar thinks it raises some seriously interesting questions about how back then faith and politics and, just trying to survive all kind of collided.
Yeah, it's a wild period, the end of the kingdom of Judah. Like, imagine, right? The Babylonian Empire, it's expanding like crazy, gobbling up everything in its path. And these smaller kingdoms, Judah included, they're stuck, caught right in the middle. It's that classic, uh-oh, here comes the schoolyard bully, what do we do?
Yeah.
Situation.
Yep. And to make things even more intense, you've got Jeremiah, this prophet, telling everyone to just surrender to Babylon. I don't know about you, but that's a tough sell no matter what year it is. What were people even thinking back then? Like, what were the arguments for and against just giving up?
Oh, it's fascinating, right? To be a fly on the wall, then. Well, let's start with, I guess you could say, the pro-surrender side. But pro might be a strong word, It's more like they saw it as acknowledging what's the word? The inevitable. I mean, Babylon, they were a powerhouse, way stronger. Plus, there's this whole idea running through the Old Testament, this concept of like divine judgment,
You mean like had Judah messed up so badly that God was, punishing them with this whole invasion thing?
Exactly. Like maybe this was all a consequence of them straying from God's path. And so surrendering, it wasn't just about like admitting defeat. It was maybe a way to like submit to God's will, even if it was brutal.
So less of a, hooray, let's surrender.
Yeah.
And more of a, well, this is awful, but maybe it's the least terrible option.
Exactly. Now, flip side, the anti-surrender folks. To them, it was cowardice, plain and simple, betraying everything they stood for. This was their land, right? Their history, their God. You can't just roll over without a fight. Plus, there's always that political angle, too.
Like maybe they could hold out, find an ally, play Babylon against someone else, classic power play stuff.
Totally. You see whispers of that in the text, this idea that, hey, maybe we can outsmart them, outmaneuver them, something. There's always a sliver of hope, right? Especially when the alternative is unthinkable.
Right, so we've got pragmatism, we've got faith, we've got maybe a little bit of wishful thinking happening on both sides. But here's the thing this scholar we're talking about. They think we might be missing a crucial piece of this whole puzzle.
And this is what's so intriguing. It might not just be about the politics or, the ethics of surrender. This scholar, they're saying it goes way deeper, especially for Jeremiah.
He sees it as a prophetic choice.
Right.
Now, I got to admit, that's a new one for me. What does that even mean?
Yeah.
Like in this context, a prophetic choice. So like Jeremiah's tapping into something, I don't know, bigger, something beyond this whole siege situation.
Yeah, exactly. Think about it. I mean, Jerusalem is surrounded. The enemy's right there, ready to break down the doors. And Jeremiah's out there telling everyone to just surrender. Like on the surface, it sounds crazy, right? Like giving up, admitting defeat. But the scholar, they're saying that for Jeremiah, it was actually, get this, a powerful act of faith.
Okay, hold on. Surrendering to Babylon, this empire about to crush them. How's that an act of faith? Help me out here.
Right. So think of it like this. Jeremiah, he totally believed that God was in control. Like ultimately, even when everything was falling apart, even when God's own people, were facing destruction. So surrendering to Babylon, it wasn't about saying, hey, Babylon, you were right all along. It was about like surrendering to God's plan, even if that plan was, well, pretty terrifying.
So trusting in the bigger picture, like a divine plan. Even if you don't get it, can't see it.
Exactly. And get this wasn't just some abstract idea for Jeremiah, He didn't just talk the talk. The scholar points out that he actually used these like symbolic gestures to really get his message across.
You mean like how prophets were always doing these dramatic things, like, I don't know, acting at a siege or something?
Yes, like that. It was performance. So for example, the yoke imagery, we see this in a couple places in Jeremiah, chapters 27 and 28. He actually walks around wearing a yoke, like on his neck, an actual yoke, like an animal.
A yoke, like as in that wooden harness thing for oxen.
Yes, that's the one. I mean, talk about a visual, right? It was this incredibly bold statement, a symbol of, the Babylonian rule that he was urging people to accept. It wasn't just, hey guys, surrender is probably the best option here. It was like he embodied that message in a way that, honestly, I don't know, probably freaked people out.
Can you imagine seeing your prophet walking around with a yoke around his neck? Talk about sending mixed messages. Was this guy for real?
Right. Not exactly subtle, but that's the thing about, like, what the scholar calls prophetic performance. It was about making a scene. And it gets even, I don't know, more intense because there's a point where Jeremiah actually confronts another prophet, this guy Hananiah. And Hananiah is saying, no way, God told me we're good. We don't need to surrender. And then get this, he breaks Jeremiah's yoke, like right there.
Oh, man. Awkward. Yeah. And I mean, talk about difference of opinion. It makes you think, though, about the pressure on those guys, right? Jeremiah, Hananiah, trying to figure out what God wanted in this whole messed up situation.
Totally. But see, that confrontation, it actually gets at the heart of what Jeremiah is trying to teach, which is recognizing the true prophetic word, even when it's hard, even when it goes against, you know, what you want to hear. And that tension, it pops up again later on. There's this final meeting between Jeremiah and King Zedekiah.
That's when Jerusalem's about to fall.
Oh, right. Yeah. Chapter 38. So the city is surrounded. Things are looking really, really bad. And Zedekiah, he is freaking out. He secretly calls for Jeremiah. Just the two of them. It's this super tense moment. Like the weight of everything is just crushing them. And Jeremiah, he doesn't budge. He tells Zedekiah straight up, surrender. It's the only way to save yourself. And your family, too.
Wow. Intense punch. So even with everyone doubting it, with his life on the line, Jeremiah still says surrender. It's kind of mind-blowing, like what kind of person does that? What kind of conviction makes you stick to your guns like that?
Yeah, and that's something the scholar really digs into, because it's one thing to talk about surrender, right? But to actually live it out, to embody it when everything's on the line, that's next level faith. And the thing is, the scholar, they're saying Jeremiah's story, this whole prophetic choice thing, it's not just ancient history, it still matters, even thousands of years later.
Okay, so how does it apply today? What's the takeaway for us?
Well, think about it. We all face tough choices, right? Times when we feel stuck or scared, unsure which way to go.
Yeah, that's life, right? Decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And what the scholar's saying is sometimes the most, courageous thing, the most faithful thing, it's to embrace surrender, to let go of control, to say, okay, I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust that something bigger than me is at work here, even if I don't get it.
So not giving up, but surrendering to something bigger. But how do we know when to do that? How do you tell the difference between surrendering to, to God's will and just giving up?
Yeah, that's the question, isn't it? When do you keep fighting and when do you just say, okay, surrender? It's like you said, it can be an act of faith, but it's also, I don't know, it's tough to tell sometimes. Surrendering, giving up, where's the line?
Right. And the scholar, they get that. They really wrestle with that.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, there's no easy answer. No 5-step plan, and maybe that's why Jeremiah's story is so powerful. It's not like a nice, neat little story with a bow on top. It's messy.
Yep.
It makes you think, makes you uncomfortable. And it makes you deal with the fact that sometimes in life, in faith, you're going to be facing the unknown. So then what? What do we do with that?
Yeah.
If there's no easy answer, what's the takeaway from Jeremiah, from this whole prophetic choice thing?
Maybe it's not about getting answers, but about learning to ask the right questions, you know? Maybe Jeremiah's story, it's like this invitation to look at our own struggles, the things we're going through, and see them differently. Instead of just going, okay, how do I fix this? What if we also asked, what if just maybe this is an opportunity to surrender, to let go of the need to control everything, and just trust that even if it feels like I'm losing, that something good can still come out of it.
I like that. It's like what you were saying before about how sometimes surrendering, it's not giving up. It's like its own kind of victory, which sounds crazy. But when you really think about Jeremiah, it makes sense,
And here's something else. The scholar points out, this theme of surrender, it pops up all over Jeremiah's story, but it's never, exactly the same. It's different depending on who he's talking to, what's going on, even how he's saying it.
So it's sometimes it's a yoke, sometimes it's a private conversation with the king. It's all surrender, but it means different things at different times.
Yeah, exactly. And the scholar's point is, we need to pay attention to that. How does the way surrender is presented, how does that change what it means? It's there's, I don't know, there's more to unpack there.
Man, this has been, I don't know about you, but this whole deep dive has been amazing. We just scratched the surface though, right? Surrender. It's a whole lot bigger than just giving up. It's about faith, trust, letting go.
Yeah, and it really makes you think, what about us? What prophetic choices are we facing in our own lives? Maybe surrender's right there, just waiting for us to embrace it.
Definitely something to think about. And hey, maybe if we can wrap our heads around this whole surrender thing, it'll help us understand not just Jeremiah's story, but also our own a little bit better too, right?